My son was in agony and needed my kidney. My daughter-in-law told me, "It's your duty. You're his mother." The doctor was already getting ready to operate on me when suddenly my 9-year-old grandson came running into the room and yelled, "Grandma, I'll tell the truth about why my dad really needs your kidney." The entire medical team froze. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has traveled. I'm lying on the cold steel of the operating table. The white light of the surgical lamp is blinding my eyes. It's so bright, I want to squeeze them shut with all my might, but I can't. My whole body is stiff, and it's not from the cold. It's from a suffocating feeling as if fate itself is squeezing my neck. The steady beep-beep of the heart monitor is a constant rhythm, but each beat is like a hammer striking my head. I can hear every sound in the room with crystal clarity. The metallic clinking of instruments as the nurse arranges them, the rustle of paper as Dr. Evans reviews my file, and even the faint whispers from the other side of the glass where my daughter-in-law Rebecca is with her parents. I try to lift my gaze toward the opaque glass. There's Rebecca, her arms crossed over her chest with a gaze as sharp as a razor blade. She's whispering something to her parents, but her eyes never leave me. It's as if she's giving me an order. Sign it now. Do it. Don't hesitate. I've already signed the consent form to donate my kidney to my son Adam. That paper must be somewhere on the doctor's desk now, my shaky signature and unchangeable commitment. The nurse holds the syringe, and the anesthesia gleams under the light. I close my eyes. I try to take a deep breath, but my chest feels as heavy as lead. I think of Adam, and my oldest son, whom I raised and sacrificed my whole life to protect. He's in the room next door, weak, waiting for my kidney to survive. I tell myself, this is the right thing to do. As a mother, I have to do it. But why do I feel this emptiness in my soul, this nameless anxiety? Suddenly, a thunderous noise startles me. The operating room door bursts open, and a gust of cold air rushes in, making the instrument tray on the table shake and clink. The entire room seems to hold its breath. I open my eyes, trying to lift my head, even though the straps are holding me tight. My 9-year-old grandson, Mario, rushes in like a small whirlwind. His sneakers are covered in mud. His school uniform is wrinkled, and his little chest is heaving as he gasps for air. Behind him, a terrified nurse is chasing him, shouting, "Child, you can't come in here! My God, stop!" But Mario doesn't stop. He runs straight toward me, his big, round eyes filled with fear, but also with determination. "Grandma," he says in a trembling voice, so clear it squeezes my heart. "I have to tell everyone why my dad really needs your kidney." The whole room falls silent. The beep-beep of the heart monitor now sounds louder, as if it wants to tear the space apart. A doctor nearby drops a pair of surgical forceps. The sound of metal hitting the marble floor is deafening. A sharp break in the tension. I look at Mario, my little grandson, whom I still carry in my arms and read stories to every night. There he is, gripping an old cell phone, his face pale, but his eyes bright. What does he know? Why is he saying this? My heart is racing as if it wants to jump out of my chest. I want to scream to ask him right there, but my throat is so dry I can't utter a word. Dr. Evans, the head surgeon, frowns. He raises a hand, signaling for the entire team to stop. His voice is deep but sharp. "Whatever you have to say it, now." I see his gaze pass over me and land on Mario, as if he too is caught in this strange moment on the other side of the glass. "Don't listen to him," she shouts in a shrill, almost hysterical voice. "He's just a kid, you'll see." But Rebecca's look is no longer cold. It's trembling with panic as if a secret is about to be revealed. Mario doesn't look at his mom. He only looks at me, gripping the cell phone in his small hand so tightly his knuckles turn white. He takes a deep breath as if gathering all the courage in his life. I want to sit up, to hug him, to tell him not to be afraid, but I can't move. I can only look. And in my little grandson's eyes, I see a pain, a truth he's trying to bring to light. In that instant, as the whole room holds its breath, memories of the past flood my mind like an avalanche, of those days when I thought my family was a closed circle full of love and trust. I remember my old house in Chicago, where every corner smelled of disinfectant, a scent I'd become so used to, I didn't even notice it. I'm 67 years old, but sometimes I feel much older, as if time stole my vitality a long time ago. My husband Joe has been bedridden for more than 10 years. He sits in his old wheelchair, its wheels squeaking every time I push him into the backyard for some air. He hardly ever talks. Only every now and then does he let out a sigh, his gaze lost in nothingness. Once I took his hand and asked him, "Joe, are you tired of this life?" He just blinked without responding. I don't know if he understood me or if I was just talking to myself. That house was my whole world, the place where I raised my 2 sons, Adam and Brandon. I did everything to get them ahead. I woke up at dawn to go to the market to sell produce. In the afternoons, I'd sit and sew clothes for the neighbors, and sometimes I'd stay up until midnight to mend torn shirts and deliver them on time. My hands became rough and calloused, my nails always with dirt from digging around in the market. But I never complained. Just wanted Adam and Brandon to have a better life, not to suffer like I did. Adam, my oldest son, was my pride. He was strong, tall, he worked in construction, and always came home with a loud laugh. But in recent years, he started to get weak. At first, it was just tiredness. Then, little by little, I saw him pale with sunken eyes, and once I felt a horrible terror when he told me he was urinating blood. I hugged him and asked, "Adam, what's wrong, son? Tell me." He just shook his head and smiled weakly. "Don't worry, Mom. It's probably just from all the hard work. Rebecca, my daughter-in-law, came into our lives like a strange wind. She was beautiful. She spoke sweetly. And at first, I truly believed she was a blessing for Adam. She took care of him diligently. She brought medicine home, watched his meals, and reminded him to take his pills at the exact time. All the neighbors praised me. "You're so lucky, Mrs. Jones, to have such a good daughter-in-law." And I believed it too. Every time I saw Rebecca give a bowl of soup to Adam, I'd tell myself I was just worrying too much. But sometimes I'd catch her cold, calculating gaze, as if she were hiding something. Once I saw her in the backyard, whispering on the phone late at night in a low but hurried voice. "Don't worry, everything is going according to the plan." I asked her, "Rebecca, who are you calling so late?" She was startled and laughed. Brandon, my younger son, was different. He's 26 years old. He lives a few blocks from my house and works as a plumber and electrician. Brandon doesn't talk much, but every time he came to visit, he'd always bring something to eat. Sometimes some oranges, other times some bread that was still warm. He'd sit next to me fixing the ceiling fan that squeaked or changing a light bulb in the kitchen. Once he looked at me and said in his deep voice, "Mom, don't work yourself to death like this. I don't want to see you exhausted." I just smiled and waved my hand. "I can still handle it, Brandon. You worry about your brother. He needs you more." But Brandon just shook his head, his gaze full of concern. Mario, my little grandson, was my only joy in those heavy days. He's 9 years old and often came to my house with his little backpack on his back. Mario liked to sit in the backyard and play with some plastic cars I bought him at a flea market. He'd tell me stories, innocent tales that sometimes left me frozen. Once he looked at me with his round eyes and said, "Grandma, my mom talks on the phone at night. I heard her say something about some medicine, but I didn't understand." I smiled and ruffled his hair. "I'm sure she was just asking the doctor something for your dad. Don't think so much about it, my boy." But inside, a seed of unease was beginning to sprout. And then one afternoon, everything changed. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. The smell of toasted rice was floating in the air when Rebecca came in. She didn't say hello. She didn't smile. She just stood there with her arms crossed. Her voice was sharp, like a knife slicing the air. "Mom, the doctor says only your kidney is compatible. It's your responsibility. You have to save him." I froze. The spoon in my hand dropped into the pan with a dull clang. I looked at her, trying to find a bit of warmth in her eyes, but I only saw a cold determination, almost a demand. "Rebecca, I know I'll do everything for Adam," I whispered, but my throat felt dry. She nodded as if she had achieved her goal and turned around. Not even 10 minutes passed when Rebecca's parents showed up. They walked into my house as if it were their own. They sat down at the dining room table and said in unison, "That's right. A mother's duty is something you can't run from. This whole family now depends on you." Adam, who at that moment was propped up in a chair so skinny I almost didn't recognize him, took my hand. His hand was freezing. "Mom," he whispered, "I trust you'll save me." I looked into his eyes, those eyes that, as a child, shone with so much life, and now only reflected exhaustion and pleading. I nodded without being able to say anything, suddenly feeling like the small room had become suffocating. The smell of medicinal herbs from Joe's pot in the corner made me feel like I couldn't breathe. That night, I took Joe his bowl of soup, just like every day. The squeaking of his wheelchair on the concrete floor was a constant reminder that I was carrying this whole family on my shoulders. I put the bowl in front of him. I looked at him, but he just sighed without saying anything. I wanted to tell him to ask him if I was doing the right thing, but he was just there as motionless as a shadow. I went out to the backyard where Mario was playing with his car. He looked up with his bright eyes, but they were full of doubt. "Grandma," he said, "what if someone gets sick because another person is giving them medicine?" I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart skipped a beat. "Why do you ask that, my boy?" I said, trying to stay calm. But Mario just lowered his head and kept pushing his car without answering. What I didn't know was that at that moment I was on the edge of an abyss, and only a few more steps would make me fall. The days that followed that afternoon, when Rebecca came to my house and left me no choice, my life felt crushed by an invisible pressure heavier than the suffocating summer heat of Chicago. I kept getting up early, going to the market to sell my vegetables and oranges, sitting under the dim light to sew clothes. But my soul was no longer at peace. Every step I took, every stitch I made, carried with it a question. Am I doing the right thing? Do I really have tabiaji? Oh, sacrifice myself like this? But then, Adam's pleading gaze, Rebecca's sharp words, and her parents' questioning looks clung to me without giving me a single moment to breathe. The next morning, when the sun was just peeking out, Rebecca was already at my door. I had just finished preparing tea. The scent of spearmint was just beginning to fill the house when she walked in without knocking, without saying hello. "Mom," she said, in a voice as firm as a nail, "the doctor says there isn't much time left. If you keep hesitating, he could be in danger." She put a stack of medical papers on the dining room table, white pages filled with numbers and signatures I didn't quite understand. She pointed to each line as if she were teaching a child. "It says clearly here that you are the only compatible one. No one else can save him." I stood there holding the teapot. The hot water was burning my fingers, but I didn't feel the pain. I only heard the sound of the broom scraping the concrete as I started to sweep the house, a way to escape Rebecca's gaze. "I heard you," I said in a barely audible voice. "I'll do everything for Adam." But inside, a heavy rock was weighing me down, making me want to scream, to run away. I kept sweeping. The sound of the broom was like a sad rhythm, trying to drown out Rebecca's words. But she didn't stop. She just stood there watching me as if she expected me to agree once more to confirm I wouldn't dare refuse. When she left, I sat in a chair and covered my face with my hands. I thought of Adam, of the days when he was little and would run after me at the market, clinging to my skirt and laughing out loud. "Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to build you a beautiful house." Now he lay there, skinny, pale, a shadow of what he once was. I wondered if I could let him go without doing anything, But every time I thought about donating my kidney, I was filled with fear, a fear not of the surgery, but of the feeling that I was being pushed toward. Dinner that night was as heavy as a funeral. Rebecca, with a fake charm, put a piece of chicken on my plate, but her voice was cold. "Mom, save your strength for the surgery." I looked at the chicken on my plate, but I couldn't swallow. Adam was sitting in front of me, his face gaunt and his eyes sunken. He tried to smile weakly. "Mom, I know you'll save me. Just like all the times you saved me when I was a kid." His words were like a stab to my heart. I remembered the days when he had a high fever and I'd stay up all night wiping him down with wet cloths, or the times he fell off his bike and I'd run to bandage his wounds. I was always there. I was always the mother willing to do anything. But this time, why did I feel so afraid? Brandon was sitting in a corner of the table, silent as a shadow. He didn't eat. He just stirred the spoon in his bowl of soup, never taking his eyes off Rebecca. I saw his look filled with suspicion, as if he was trying to see through my daughter-in-law's mask. I wanted to ask him, but I didn't dare. The air in the room was thick. The only sound was the clinking of spoons against plates, like hammers on my conscience. After dinner, Rebecca got up and personally took Adam's plate to the kitchen to wash it, not letting anyone else touch it. She did it quickly, but I noticed her checking the plate very carefully, as if she was afraid someone would see something inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lying in my old bed, I listened to the tick-tock of the clock on the wall. Every second, a reminder that Adam's time was running out. I got up and walked down the hall to get a glass of water. Then I heard whispers from Adam and Rebecca's room. I stopped, standing in the dark, holding my breath. Rebecca's voice was low but clear. "Yes, after the transplant, we'll have all the data. Don't worry, she won't dare refuse." I stood there, my heart pounding. My hands were trembling, so much I had to lean on the wall so I wouldn't fall. Data? What were they talking about? I wanted to knock on the door, confront her, but right at that moment, Rebecca opened it. She was startled to see me and then smiled falsely. "Still up, Mom? I was just calling to ask about his medicine." I nodded and turned away, but I felt as if thorns had been plunged into my heart. Rebecca's smile, her voice, everything was false, like a mask hiding something terrible. In the days that followed the tense conversation with Rebecca and her parents, I felt like I was living in a foggy dream where everything familiar was becoming strange and terrifying. I continued with my daily tasks, going to the market to sell, sewing clothes, feeding my husband Joe. But every action was mechanical, soulless. My heart was heavy, as if a black cloud hung over my head. And Rebecca's words, Adam's pleading gaze, they spun in my mind without giving me a second of peace. But then, one afternoon, when Mario, my 9-year-old grandson, came over, Mario came in with his sneakers stained with mud and his little hands still sticky from art class paint. He left his old backpack in a corner, sat on the floor, and took out the plastic car I had bought him at the flea market last year. I looked at him, trying to smile, but my mind was in a jumble. Mario had always been a little light in my dark days, with his innocent stories and his crystalline laugh. But that day, he didn't smile. He pushed the car back and forth on the floor with a lost look, and suddenly he lifted his head and stared at me. "Grandma," he said in a low but clear voice, "what if my dad isn't sick because of life, but because someone is giving him medicine on purpose?" I was, startled as if I had been slapped. The spoon in my hand almost fell, but I managed to hold on to it, trembling. "Why do you say that, Mario?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, but my heart was pounding. I looked into his eyes, so clear but full of a worry that seemed too big for his age. Mario didn't answer right away. He lowered his head and kept playing with his car, but I saw him clench his hand as if he were holding something back. I wanted to hug him to ask him more, but I only managed a nervous laugh. "You're thinking too much, my boy. Your dad is sick, and the doctors are curing him." But my smile was forced, and Mario didn't return it. He just looked at me. He got up silently, took his backpack, and ran back to his house. Mario's question was like a stone thrown into a calm lake in my heart, creating ripples of doubt. I stayed, there in my small kitchen, looking at the vegetables on the table, but unable to concentrate. I thought of Adam, of the bottles of pills Rebecca always brought, of how she controlled everything related to my son. I told myself I was probably imagining things. Rebecca was Adam's wife. She loved him. She wouldn't hurt him. But deep in my heart, I knew something wasn't right. That afternoon, Brandon came with his toolbox, saying he was going to fix the kitchen light that had been flickering the night before. I watched him climb the ladder, twist and tighten things, and the light from the new bulb lit up the whole kitchen. But then, as he came, down with the old light bulb in his hand, Brandon looked at me with an unusual seriousness. "Mom," he said in a low voice, almost a whisper. "My sister-in-law is acting very strange. I saw some unlabeled pill bottles in my brother's medicine cabinet, and she hides them very well." I was startled, and the plate I was washing in the sink fell, splashing water on my blouse. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice choked. Brandon got off the ladder and stood in front of me, his eyes filled with concern. "Mom, I'm afraid someone—" He didn't finish the sentence, but his look said it all. I stood there, my hands wet, feeling as if the floor was sinking beneath my feet. I wanted to scream to tell Brandon he was overthinking things, that Rebecca couldn't do something so terrible. But I couldn't speak. I just kept looking at Brandon. And in my head, Mario's question echoed again. What if my dad is sick because someone is giving him medicine? I tried to discard that idea, but it clung to me like a shadow. I couldn't escape. The next afternoon, I took Soup to Adam at the hospital. The white room and the pungent smell of disinfectant made me feel like I couldn't breathe. Adam was lying down, skinny with IVs in both arms, but he still tried to smile when he saw me. "Mom, you're here already," he said in a weak voice. I put the bowl on the nightstand, and when I was about to give him the first spoonful, I saw Rebecca next to the bed holding a glass of water. She discreetly dropped a strange-colored pill into the glass. Movement so fast that if I hadn't been watching carefully, I wouldn't have noticed. When I came in, she was startled and spilled a little water on the floor. "What pill is that, Rebecca?" I asked, trying to sound calm. She smiled, but her smile was forced. "It's a supplement for his kidney. The doctor prescribed it." I nodded, but a chill ran down my spine. I couldn't stay calm. After Adam finished eating, I looked for the on-call doctor, a middle-aged man with thick glasses. "Did you prescribe any new kidney supplements for Adam?" He was surprised and checked the file. "No, we haven't prescribed anything new. The current medication is sufficient." His answer left me frozen. I stood in the hospital hallway listening to the announcements over the loudspeaker, but my mind was blank. Rebecca had lied. What was that pill? Why did she have to hide it? At sunset, Mario came to my house again. This time he didn't play with his car. He sat in a chair and took an old cell phone with a broken screen from his backpack. "Grandma," he said in a low but firm voice, "I want you to listen to this." He typed something and handed me the phone. A recording played. It was Rebecca's voice, whispering but clear. "After the transplant, the test results will be perfect. Don't worry, she won't dare refuse." I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I looked at Mario, my little grandson, and saw that his eyes were red, as if he was just as scared as I was. "I found it on Mom's phone," he whispered. She always talks at night, but yesterday she forgot to delete it. I hugged him tightly, my tears soaking his hair. My God, what was happening? Why was Rebecca talking about test results? What did my kidney have to do with all this? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker, feeling like I was trapped in a nightmare. The next morning, I went straight to Brandon's house. I knocked desperately until he opened, sleepy and surprised. "Mom, what happened?" I told him everything. Rebecca's pill, Mario's recording, the doctor's denial. Brandon clenched his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. "I knew it," he muttered. "I knew she was up to something." He took out a small notebook from a drawer. In it, he had written dates and times. "Look, every time Adam got worse, Rebecca gave him new medicine. I followed her once to the pharmacy, but she didn't go inside. She met a man in the alley and got bottles without labels. I felt my knees buckle. I had to hold onto the table to keep from falling. My own daughter-in-law, the woman everyone praised, was slowly killing my son, and now she wanted my kidney. But why? What was the real purpose?" Brandon looked at me, his eyes full of fire. "Mom, we have to stop her, but we need proof strong enough that no one can deny." At that moment, Mario came in with his backpack. He looked at both of us, serious beyond his years. "I have more recordings," he said softly. "I wanted to show you before it's too late." He pulled out the old cell phone and played another clip. Rebecca's voice again. This time she was laughing quietly. "Yes, once we have the kidney, the research will be complete. Don't worry, the old woman won't survive long enough to ask questions." My blood turned to ice. They weren't just... The walls of Brandon's house felt like they were closing in. I sat there, my hands trembling, staring at the little phone Mario had placed on the table. His small fingers hovered over it, ready to play more recordings, but my heart couldn't take it. "Enough," I whispered, my throat raw. "I need to think." But there was no time left to think. The next morning, Rebecca arrived at my house again, this time with a stack of hospital documents. She dropped them on the table as if they were a hammer striking my soul. "Mom, we need to sign everything today. Adam is getting worse. The doctors are preparing the surgery." Her tone left no room for refusal. Behind her stood her parents, nodding along with cold authority. "A mother who refuses to save her child is no mother at all," they said, their voices dripping with judgment. I wanted to scream, to accuse her of everything, to tell her I knew the truth. But Mario's frightened eyes and Brandon's warning look stopped me. If I revealed what I knew without solid proof, Rebecca could twist everything. She had already wrapped Adam around her finger. He believed every word she said. That afternoon, Brandon and I searched Adam's room. While he was at the hospital, we carefully opened the drawers and cabinets. In the bottom drawer of the wardrobe, behind neatly folded shirts, we found bottles, small, amber bottles with no labels, filled with colored pills. Brandon picked one up, his hands shaking. "These aren't prescribed. I checked all his files. She's been giving him something else." We took photos, careful not to disturb anything. Then Brandon whispered, "We'll show this to the doctor. But we need more. Something that ties her directly." His eyes burned with determination, but mine were filled with dread. That night, Mario returned. He climbed onto the chair beside me and pulled a small folded paper from his backpack. "Grandma, hey Chadang," he said softly. "I drew this because I heard Mom talking." On the paper was a crude sketch of two people, Rebecca and a man I didn't know, standing under a streetlight, passing what looked like bottles between them. My heart clenched. Even a child had seen the truth. I lay awake until dawn, my hands clutching that drawing. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. If I refused the surgery, Adam might die. If I agreed, I might be giving my life away for Rebecca's secret plan. I stared at Joe sleeping silently in his wheelchair, his chest barely rising and falling, and whispered, "What do I do?" But he didn't answer. He never did. By the next evening, I was too exhausted to resist. Rebecca showed up again, her voice smooth but firm, carrying the hospital papers and the consent forms. "Mom, this is the only way. If you love Adam, prove it." Her words cut me like knives, and so, with my hands shaking, I signed. Rebecca's smile was quick, triumphant. She gathered the papers and walked out without another word. I sat at the table, staring at the ink of my signature, feeling as though I had signed my own death warrant. That night, I sat with Brandon and Mario. My grandson held my hand tightly, whispering, "Grandma, don't be afraid. I'll help you." His little voice gave me strength, but deep inside I knew I was walking into a trap, and only God knew if I would come back alive. That night, I sat alone in my small room in front of the old wooden table. The oil lamp flickered. Its dim light illuminated the trembling words I was writing in my will. I wrote that the little house would go to Brandon and some of my few valuables to Mario. Every stroke was like a cut in my soul. I didn't know if I'd survive the operation, but I wanted to be prepared to leave something for those I loved. Joe was sitting motionless in his wheelchair in a corner, watching me with lifeless eye. I saw his hand tremble as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. "Joe, I have to do it right. I have to save Adam." He didn't answer. He just blinked, and 2 tears fell down his gaunt cheeks. I folded the will and put it at the bottom of an old wooden box where I kept memories of my wedding. Outside, the rain poured, mixing with the sound of my own sobs. Early in the morning, when the sky was still dark and the fog clung to the little streets leading to the hospital, I was lying on a gurney in an ambulance. I was clutching a small fabric bag with a change of clothes and an embroidered handkerchief I'd had since my wedding day. The ambulance siren howled, but I no longer paid attention. The street lights filtered through the window, blurred like my broken dreams. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, but my chest felt heavy. Today was the day I would donate my kidney to Adam, my son. I had already decided. I had written my will. I had prepared myself mentally, but my heart was still in knots, as if I were entering a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When the ambulance stopped, a nurse pushed the gurney down an endless hospital hallway. The screeching of the wheels on the tiled floor was like a hammer hitting my head. Rebecca was walking right behind me. Her steps were light but firm, like those of a guard. "Don't worry, Mom," she said in a low but sharp voice. "After the surgery, everything will be fine." I looked at her out of the corner of my eye and saw a flash of triumph in her eyes, as if she had already secured her victory. Her smile gave me a chill, not from cold, but from the feeling that I was being led into a plan where I was just a pawn without a will. At the reception, Rebecca's parents, Mr. Collins and Mrs. Peterson, were already there. They were dressed up. Mr. Collins in an old but well-ironed suit, and Mrs. Peterson in a bright red dress, as if they were coming to a big event and not to a surgery. They took Rebecca by the arm and greeted the doctors with exaggerated friendliness, as if they had known each other all their lives. I heard Mrs. Peterson laugh loudly as she said to a young doctor, "Thank you for all your support, doctor. We won't forget this favor." I stood there clutching my fabric bag, feeling like a stranger in my own story. Adam had already been taken to a waiting room. They allowed me to see him before I went into the operating room. The small room was cold, and his skinny arms were full of IVs. His face was pale, his eyes sunken. But when he saw me, he tried to smile weakly. "Mom, thank you," he whispered, his voice broken by exhaustion. I took his hand. It was freezing, and I felt like crying. "Adam, I'll do everything to make you get better," I told him. But my voice trembled as if I were trying to convince myself. I looked into my son's eyes. I saw an absolute trust in them and wondered, am I doing the right thing, or am I risking my life for something I don't fully understand? Suddenly, Brandon came running in with his hands still stained with grease from work. He was gasping. His shirt was soaked with sweat, as if he had run a long distance. "Mom, don't do it," he said, almost pleading as he grabbed me by the shoulders. "I beg you, don't donate the kidney. Something isn't right." I looked at Brandon. I saw his red eyes filled with rage and concern. I wanted to tell him that I had already decided that I couldn't let Adam die, but the words wouldn't come out. I just put my hand on his, squeezed it gently, and let the nurse take me away. Brandon was left there powerless, shouting behind me, "Mom, listen to me." But I didn't turn around. I didn't dare turn around because I was... The hospital hallway was long and cold. The smell of disinfectant was so strong it made me nauseous. An impersonal voice sounded over the loudspeakers. "Operating room number 3. Prepare for kidney transplant." They took me to a changing room where a nurse put a cap and a mask on me. The cold blue gown they put on me was a reminder that I was about to lose a part of my body. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw my gaunt face, my eyes surrounded by dark circles. I asked myself, "Mary, what are you doing? Are you sure this is the right thing to do?" But then the image of Adam in the hospital bed appeared in my mind, and I gritted my teeth and went on. As I walked down the hallway, I saw Rebecca and Mrs. Peterson standing by a glass window talking to an unknown man. He was wearing a black jacket and a cap that covered his face, identical to the man in the photo Brandon had shown me. I saw Rebecca hand him an envelope, and he quickly put it in his jacket pocket. My heart started to beat hard. A cold sweat ran down the back of my neck. What were they doing? What was in that envelope? I wanted to stop, to scream and demand an answer, but the nurse took my arm and led me into the operating room. Inside the operating room, the white light shone directly into my eyes, so bright I had to squint. Dr. Evans was there, his face serious but calm. "Everything is ready, Mrs. Jones," he said in a grave voice. "Just relax." I nodded, but my body was stiff. The nurse placed electrodes on my chest, and the heart monitors beeped. Constant, relentless. Rebecca appeared on the other side of the glass. She pressed her face against the window and made a sign to sign quickly toward the papers another nurse was holding. I took the pen, trembling. The ink ran on the paper. When I signed, I felt as if I were signing my own death sentence. I looked at my blurred signature. I thought of the will I had written the night before for Brandon and Mario, and I wondered, will this be the last time I'm conscious? Just as the doctor was getting ready to inject the anesthesia, a crash made the whole room tremble. The door burst open. The screech of the hinges ripped the air. All the doctors and nurses were startled. Some turned around abruptly with panic in their eyes. Mario came in like a small whirlwind. His sneakers were still stained with mud. His school uniform was wrinkled, and his little chest was heaving as he gasped. He was tightly holding his old cell phone with the broken screen as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. A nurse ran after him, shouting desperately, "Child, you can't come in here! My God, stop!" But Mario didn't stop. He ran straight toward me, his big round eyes filled with fear, but burning with a determination I had never seen in a child. "Grandma," he said in a trembling voice, but so clear it froze everyone in the room. "I have to tell everyone why my dad really needs your kidney." His words were like a bomb that exploded in my head. I held my breath. My heart seemed to stop. The operating room fell into an absolute silence, broken only by the beep of the heart monitor, which now sounded louder, as if it wanted to shatter the stillness. A nearby doctor dropped a pair of surgical forceps. The metallic sound against the Dr. Evans, the head surgeon, raised a hand, signaling for the entire team to stop. He frowned, but his voice was calm and firm. "Let the boy speak. Whatever you have to say it now." I looked at Mario. I saw his little hand gripping the cell phone, his face pale, but his eyes bright, as if he were carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Through the glass, Rebecca banged on the door furiously, making the glass resound. "Don't listen to him!" she shouted in a shrill, almost hysterical voice. "He's just a kid, you'll see." But Rebecca's gaze was no longer icy cold. It was trembling with panic, as if the secret she had tried so hard to hide was about to come to light. Mario didn't look at his mom. He came up to me, and with trembling hands, he pressed play on the cell phone. A recording played. It was Rebecca's voice, whispered, but clear as a knife plunging into my heart. "After the transplant, the test results will be perfect. Don't worry, she won't dare refuse. This result is worth 100 times more." The entire room seemed to explode in silence. I felt my blood turn to ice. The air get stuck in my throat. Dr. Evans turned abruptly to look at me, his eyes wide with amazement. "Stop," he ordered in a voice as sharp as a scalpel. "Stop all preparations right now." A nurse quickly withdrew the syringe. The others stood motionless, not daring to move. Rebecca, on the other side of the glass, let out a scream and hit the door. "It's not true. She made it all up. This child is being manipulated." But her voice broke, as if even she didn't believe her own words. I looked at Mario and saw him burst into tears, but he was still clinging to the cell phone as if it were the last piece of evidence to save me. "I have a video too," he said, his voice choked. He played a video, and the image appeared on the small screen. Rebecca and Mrs. Peterson in the parking lot exchanging an envelope with the unknown man. Mrs. Peterson's voice was heard, cold and clear. "After this operation, we'll have enough data to sell the medicine abroad. This money will change everything." I lay there, my vision blurred by tears, feeling a mix of horror and relief. Horror for the truth I had tried so hard to avoid, now exposed before everyone, and relief because I finally no longer had to lie to myself. Brandon burst in from the hallway, his face red with anger. "Enough!" he shouted, throwing himself against the glass door to face Rebecca. "You poisoned him. You thought we were all blind." Before anyone could react, Brandon raised his hand and slapped Rebecca. The dry sound echoed down the hallway, making Mrs. Peterson scream. "How dare you hit my daughter!" she cried. But Brandon didn't stop. He pointed at Rebecca, his voice trembling with rage. "What medicines have you been giving him? What did you do to my brother, Adam?" Rebecca put a hand to her cheek. Tears streamed down her face, but in her eyes I saw no regret, only the panic of someone who had been discovered. "You're crazy!" she yelled, turning to Dr. Evans. "Don't listen to them. They're slandering me." But Dr. Evans didn't answer. He turned pale and addressed a nurse. "This is no longer a surgery, it's a crime scene. Call the police now." A nurse ran out while the others stood there looking at each other in confusion. I lay there feeling the world crumble. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. I looked at Mario, my little grandson, who had bravely burst into the operating room to save me. I looked at Brandon, my younger son, who had tried to protect me at all costs, and I thought of Adam, my son, who lay in the room. When the police arrived, the chaos only intensified. Hospital security intervened. Rebecca, Mr. Collins, and Mrs. Peterson were held. Mrs. Peterson, who had been so bold in my living room, fell to the floor clutching her cane, her voice turning into bitter accusations. "You manipulated your grandson," she cried, pointing at me. "You forced him to lie." But the videos and recordings could not be denied. They led Rebecca away in handcuffs, her screams echoing down the corridor. Mr. Collins and Mrs. Peterson walked with their heads bowed, escorted in silence. I lay on the operating table, still trembling, but it was no longer from fear. A strange feeling of relief flooded me, as if I had been freed from a cage I didn't know I was in. Dr. Evans came over. His face was serious, but his gaze had softened. "Mrs. Jones," he said in a grave voice, "we have canceled the surgery. We will transfer Adam to alternative treatment. Dialysis combined with new medications. You risked your health preparing for this, but you have saved his life and your dignity. I looked at him. Tears were rolling down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. "Thank you, doctor," I whispered in a weak but sincere voice. I didn't know if I had really saved my dignity, but I knew that for the first time in months, I felt like I was breathing, truly breathing. Brandon ran to me and helped me sit up. He took my hand tightly. His gaze was firm but full of pain. "You still have me, Mom," he said in a choked voice. "I'm going to protect you from now on. I promise." I squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of his rough, grease-stained skin. I looked into Brandon's eyes and saw the strength of a son willing to carry the whole world to protect his mother. Outside, the rain had stopped. For the first time in a long while, there was a quiet that felt like the possibility of a new beginning. The days that follow, Ed, were chaos, but they were also a strange kind of calm after the storm. Rebecca was gone, arrested along with her parents. The house that once echoed with her sharp orders and false sweetness now felt different, emptier but freer. I could finally breathe, though every breath came with the memory of how close I had been to death. Adam was kept under strict observation in the hospital. The doctors confirmed what Brandon and Mario had suspected all along. The strange pills Rebecca had given him were slowly damaging his kidneys. They were never prescribed. They were meant to make him weaker and more dependent on treatment. The shock of that truth nearly broke me. My son, my Adam, had been poisoned by the woman he trusted with his life. Dr. Evans explained the new plan. Adam would begin dialysis immediately while they adjusted his treatment. They believed he could recover enough strength to qualify for a different, safer operation later. When I visited Adam, he was confused. He couldn't believe Rebecca had done this. His hands shook as he gripped mine. "Mom, I don't understand." When the police arrived, the chaos only intensified. Hospital security intervened. Rebecca, Mr. Collins, and Mrs. Peterson were held. Mrs. Peterson, who had been so bold in my living room, fell to the floor clutching her cane, her voice turning into bitter accusations. "You manipulated your grandson," she cried, pointing at me. "You forced him to lie." But the videos and recordings could not be denied. They led Rebecca away in handcuffs, her screams echoing down the corridor. Mr. Collins and Mrs. Peterson walked with their heads bowed, escorted in silence. I lay on the operating table, still trembling, but it was no longer from fear. A strange feeling of relief flooded me, as if I had been freed from a cage I didn't know I was in. Dr. Evans came over. His face was serious, but his gaze had softened. "Mrs. Jones," he said in a grave voice, "we have canceled the surgery. We will transfer Adam to alternative treatment, dialysis combined with new medications. You risked your health preparing for this, but you have saved his life and your dignity." I looked at him. Tears were rolling down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. "Thank you, doctor," I whispered in a weak but sincere voice. I didn't know if I had really saved my dignity, but I knew that for the first time in months, I felt like I was breathing, truly breathing. Brandon ran to me and helped me sit up. He took my hand tightly. His gaze was firm but full of pain. "You still have me, Mom," he said in a choked voice. "I'm going to protect you from now on. I promise." I squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of his rough, grease-stained skin. I looked into Brandon's eyes and saw the strength of a son willing to carry the whole world to protect his mother. Outside, the rain had stopped. For the first time in a long while, there was a quiet that felt like the possibility of a new beginning. The days that follow, Ed, were chaos, but they were also a strange kind of calm after the storm. Rebecca was gone, arrested along with her parents. The house that once echoed with her sharp orders and false sweetness now felt different, emptier but freer. I could finally breathe, though every breath came with the memory of how close I had been to death. Adam was kept under strict observation in the hospital. The doctors confirmed what Brandon and Mario had suspected all along. The strange pills Rebecca had given him were slowly damaging his kidneys. They were never prescribed. They were meant to make him weaker and more dependent on treatment. The shock of that truth nearly broke me. My son, my Adam, had been poisoned by the woman he trusted with his life. Dr. Evans explained the new plan. Adam would begin dialysis immediately while they adjusted his treatment. They believed he could recover enough strength to qualify for a different, safer operation later. When I visited Adam, he was confused. He couldn't believe Rebecca had done this. His hands shook as he gripped mine. "Mom, I don't understand. She said she loved me. She said everything was for me." I had no answer. My heart was heavy, torn between relief and grief. "Sometimes love is just a mask, Adam," I whispered, brushing his hair back. "Sometimes it hides something darker." Brandon was at my side through it all. He visited the hospital every day, watching over Adam like a hawk. Mario, too, came often, carrying his little backpack, sitting on the chair by Adam's bed with a seriousness far beyond his years. Once I saw Mario slip his small hand into Adam's and say softly, "Dad, don't be sad. Grandma and I will always protect you." Adam's eyes filled with tears. He pulled Mario close and kissed his forehead. At home, life was quieter. Joe remained in his wheelchair, silent, a shadow of the man he once was. But when I wheeled him to the backyard, I thought I saw a faint smile. But the scars remained. The image of Rebecca handing that envelope to the stranger, her voice on those recordings, her cold eyes watching me as I signed my consent, it haunted me. At night, I would wake up drenched in sweat, hearing Mario's trembling voice echo in my mind. "Grandma, I have to tell everyone why my dad really needs your kidney." The neighbors began to whisper. Some said they had always suspected Rebecca was too perfect. Others claimed they had seen her meeting strange people in alleys. Everyone had an opinion, but none of them had acted. Only Mario, a 9-year-old boy, had found the courage to shout the truth. I often sat with Brandon on the porch, the summer air heavy but bearable now. He would drink his coffee in silence before finally saying, "Mom, you almost died because of her. But you didn't. You're stronger than all of this." His words gave me comfort, though I still felt fragile, as if one wrong move could shatter me. And yet, in that fragility, I also found strength. Because I had survived, and because my grandson had been brave enough to save me. The trial came quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings Mario had saved, the bottles of unlabeled pills Brandon had photographed, and the video of Rebecca and her mother exchanging envelopes in the parking lot. The prosecutors presented it all. The jury didn't take long to decide. Rebecca, along with her parents, was sentenced for attempted murder, fraud, and medical malpractice conspiracy. The unknown man in the video was later identified as a pharmaceutical broker. He had been paying Rebecca for access to experimental data they could only obtain by forcing a kidney transplant under false pretenses. When the judge read the sentence, Rebecca turned to me one last time, her face, once so calm and sweet, twisted with bitterness. "If it wasn't for that boy," she spat, pointing at Mario, "everything would have been perfect." But Mario, sitting beside me, didn't flinch. He held my hand tightly and whispered, "Don't be afraid, Grandma." His little voice carried more strength than Rebecca's fury. Afterward, life tried to return to normal, though normal felt different now. Adam stayed in the hospital for several weeks. Slowly, his strength returned. The dialysis treatments were difficult, but the doctors assured us his body was recovering from the damage. When he was strong enough to walk outside, I wheeled Joe to the hospital so we could all be together. The 4 of us, me, Joe, Adam, and Mario, sat in the hospital garden, the sun warm on our faces. For the first time in months, I felt like a family again. Brandon became my rock. He visited daily, fixing things around the house, making sure Mario was cared for, and standing by Adam's side. One evening, as the sun set behind the old brick buildings, Brandon told me, "Mom, you gave your whole life for us. It's time we protect you now." His words filled me with a peace I hadn't felt in years. The neighbors eventually stopped whispering. Some apologized for not noticing sooner, for not helping. Others simply avoided eye contact, ashamed they had believed Rebecca's facade. But I no longer cared what they thought. My concern was only for Adam's recovery and Mario's future. Mario remained my little hero. Every night he came to my house with his backpack, sat at the kitchen table, and asked me to tell him a story. Sometimes I told him fairy tales. Sometimes I told him about his father when he was a boy. But deep down, I knew Mario himself had lived a story braver than any tale I could ever tell. One night, as I tucked him into bed, he looked at me with his wide, innocent eyes and asked, "Grandma, are you happy now?" Tears filled my eyes. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Yes, my boy, because of Yai. Ow, I am alive."